sommelier Beverly Crandon, and welcome to the Wine Down, where we talk about all things wine and make it highly approachable. And on today's session, we're going to be talking about some of the rituals that come along with wine tasting. Why we look at a wine, why we swirl it in the glass, and why we smell it. I have a lot of people who ask me if it even matters with the swirling of a wine in the glass and so forth, and it definitely does. I will tell you, with wine education, one of the things that helped me when I was blinding wines was going through this ritual of looking at it in the glass and then swirling it and then nosing it. I was able to tell things like, is this cool climate, warm climate? What grape could this potentially be? Where do I think this is grown? And so aside from just wine education, but I think when you do these things, it really does prepare your palate for what it's in store for. It just makes the whole session of wine tasting, or even just that lovely dinner you're having, even that more special. So let's start with the first one, which is why we look at wine. So why we look at wine? If you've got wine with you, I encourage you to get like a white piece of paper or a cloth and hold the wine up against that. Now, one of the things that you'll see is, the sense of color of the wine. So looking at color of the wine can tell you quite a few things. For example, if my wine is deep ruby, then I might be thinking, this could be a Cabernet Sauvignon. Versus if it was a lighter ruby, I might be thinking it's going to be a thinner skin grape, maybe a Pinot Noir or a Gamay. The same thing with whites. On the flip side, if I look at it and I'm seeing like a deep golden color, this is a good indication that this white wine has got some age on it. And as we talk about age, this was a red wine and I did this rim testing. I'm going to be able to see, is the rim color of my wine any different than what's in the deeper bowl area? So if you see a red wine and the deep bowl area is more of a bright ruby red, but your rimming area of the glass of the wine is now like a garnet, kind of like a burnt orange color, that is a good indication that this wine has some age on it. The other thing, when I'm looking at my wine in the glass, so not just color, but I'm also looking for clarity. And clarity will tell me a couple of things. And by that, I mean, is the wine hazy or cloudy in my glass? If that's the case, then that's an indication to me that this wine has been unfiltered and unfined. And so that means it's a relatively low intervention wine. Is there any sediments in the glass that I'm seeing? Hopefully you won't have any sediments in your glass if it's served to you appropriately, but sometimes you do get some, right? And that's going to be an indicator to me of this is probably an older wine because it's got some sediments in the glass. The other thing that people will look at their wine for, have you ever heard anybody say, oh, this wine's got great legs and there's tearing? That is not an indicator really of this is going to be a wonderful wine. I have heard people say that, oh my God, the legs on this are so amazing. It's going to be a great wine on the palate. What legs tell you, it's an indicator of the alcohol and the sugar levels. If the line coming down the side of your glass is thick and viscous and slow, then it tells me I'm going to have a wine with higher alcohol levels, right? A 14.5 or higher. If it's thick and slow, it means I could be having a sweeter wine when it comes to that sweet wine scale. This is going to be an off-dry wine. This is not going to be a dry wine. So looking at it does give you that information. But again, it's no indicator that it's going to be amazing on the palate. So when people tell you that, they're lying. All right, so let's move on to the next one, which is why we swirl. Okay, now why we swirl wine in our glass. So there definitely is rhyme or reason to that. The number one reason that we swirl the wine in our glass is we're doing our own manual form of aeration with our hands, right? We want that oxygen exchange to happen. When oxygen hits the wine in your glass, it then starts to wake up those aromatics, right? Your aroma molecules are starting to wake up. That what we call volatile compounds in wine. But don't get freaked out. Volatile compounds are natural in any growing thing. It naturally occurs in grapes. It occurs during fermentation. It occurs during aging. But it's those compounds that give you the lovely fruit we love to smell on the nose, the florals, the spices, the herbs, all that good stuff comes from those aromatics and those volatile compounds. That's a big reason why we swirl. Now, the other reason why we swirl, especially if it's a red wine, and you may have noticed this in the past too when you've been drinking a red, so you're swirling that red and all of a sudden there's like some red staining happening around the glass, right? The outer area of the glass. What that tells you is that, you're probably in for a thick-skinned red grape in this glass, which is now getting your palate thinking about tannins. I'm quite sure it is. And a lovely steak, maybe. I don't know. But pro tip, right, before we move on to smelling, pro tip, when you're swirling, you want to swirl your glass from the stem, not from the bulb area here, and a bowl area here. And I've seen people swirl it this way, and yes, that's a way to get air to exchange with your wine. But what that does is it prematurely heats up your wine because your palm is hotter, and so it's going to prematurely change the wine and not be the best experience. So swirl from the stem. Before we get into even smelling and why we smell wines, let's look at what we've learned so far from just looking and swirling our wine. So from looking at the wine, it gave us hints on what grape this could be. It gave us hints on the age of the grape. It also gave us hints on the winemaking. Is it unfiltered, unfined? And it also gave us hints on the alcohol level and the sugar levels. From swirling in our glass, not only were we able to heighten those aromatics, and we probably got some aromas on the nose if it's a highly aromatic wine as you're swirling, but we were also able to tell if it was a thick-skinned grape, especially a red wine, because of the extraction around the glass as I was swirling. So we've got all of these hints right now that's already telling our palate, whoa, you're in for a big treat. Okay, now let's break down why we smell. When we smell wine, we're actually engaging one of our strongest senses, and that's the sense of smell, or our olfactory system. Our nose, unlike the palate, can pick up thousands of aromas, where our palate can pick up 5, bordering 6 now, basic flavors, which are sweet, sour, salt, bitter, umami. They're debating on fat, but whatever. But that's what the palate can pick up versus the thousands that the nose can pick up. And the reason why that is that your olfactory has receptors in the nose. And so when you smell something, it puts a fingerprint or a thumbprint right on that receptor, which then sends a message to the part of the brain called the limbic part of the brain. And that's the part of the brain that controls memories and feelings and emotions. This direct connection is why smell can trigger so many vibrant or maybe not so vibrant memories from the past. And I also think by smelling your wine and doing this and hitting that limbic system, especially if the wine is complex, you're creating a deeper experience with that wine in your glass. I know it sounds very romantic, but it's definitely happening. You're going to pick up all of those aromas of that wine, and sometimes those too will remind you of moments of history, moments of your childhood, someone baking cookies or whatever the case may be. It does add to that element of wine and connecting on a deeper level. So smelling wine before sipping, not only does it prepare your palate for what to expect, it heightens that kind of sensory experience that you're going to have with that wine. And I think that's important. Another reason why we smell wine, we're looking to see, are there any faults with the wine? I would pick up cork taint, and we have a lovely video and blog post about cork taint if you want to learn more about that. And that is a flaw that happens in 3% of wines. And if you have a wine that's got cork taint as a flaw, you can't drink that. Put that aside, move on, open up the other bottle in that case. Pro tip, when you're smelling wine, you want to smell closer to the top of your bowl versus the bottom. The bottom of the bowl is where a lot of your alcohol aromas will sit, and that's what you're going to whiff in if you go at the bottom of the bowl or the top of the bowl. Because you want to tell your palate the right idea about this wine. So sniff here, not here. Whew. That was a lot of work. But listen, from looking at that wine, swirling it, and smelling it, we learned so much before we even had a chance to sip it. From looking at the wine, we got some indicators on what grape it could be. We got some indicators on the age. We were able to see because it could be unfiltered and unfined and therefore low intervention. We were able to tell things about like the alcohol and the sugar. From swirling it in our glass, the aromatics were lifted. We were able to get some of those aromas already. And also from swirling, I was able to see, could this be a thick-skinned grape? Because there's some extraction or staining on my glass. Finally, the smelling, the most important part. I was able with my olfactory to get aromas on a wine that tell me things about its fruit structure, its earthiness, spice, minerality. You know, if something on the nose is fruit first, I'm going to start to think, especially if that fruit is ripe, I'm going to start to think this is probably coming from a warmer climate. Something on the nose gives me spice and earthy notes first, I'm going to start to think this is likely coming from a cooler climate. So all of this, you guys, before we even tasted the wine. Now, that's incredible. Now, there you have it. I'm certified sommelier Beverly Crandon, and today on the Wine Down, we talked about that ritual. The looking at the wine, the swirling of the glass, and the nosing, the smelling of that wine, and what that all means. If you like it below, share with your friends. I mean, come on. This is the best kind of education. Wine 101. Today's last word is not as romantic and poetic as previous ones. I just think if you go through wine and tasting it this way by looking at it, swirling, but especially taking the time to smell it. I wasn't joking when I think it deepens that experience that you're going to have with that wine because you're triggering and making a connection between your olfactory, those receptors, and the limbic system. You'll remember that wine, not even just that wine, but the people you're sharing that wine with, the meal you had, where you were. It's all a part of it. It's all a part of it. It's that beauty in wine tasting. It's that beauty in wine enjoyment. It's that beauty in sharing wine. Smelling it, that sensory, that limbic system, it creates a memory that you can't ever erase. And hopefully they're great memories. That's the last word.